The Cleveland Cavaliers were one of the biggest surprises and success stories of the 2021-22 season, nearly making the playoffs even while being hit hard by injuries. The future was bright with Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, and Evan Mobley at the center of it, but how did the Cavaliers take the next step forward, and what is next for the Cleveland Cavaliers? Darius Garland took the leap to being an all-star this season, showing he is and will be one of the best point guards in the NBA. He is a great scorer and a much improved playmaker, someone who creates a ton of offense for this Cavs team. There was a time where people were unsure who would be the better fit at point guard between him and Collin Sexton, and just in general, who would be the better player. Now, of course, unfortunately, due to Sexton's injury, Garland has had a bit of advantage, but he has cemented himself as the all-star point guard for this team moving forward. Evan Mobley had a very impressive rookie season, proving he has Defensive Player of the Year upside while already being a fine offensive contributor. He has much more upside to continue to grow physically and in his basketball skills, where ultimately the sky is the limit for Mobley, and the Cavs have found a future star. Jarrett Allen was another first-time All-Star last year, in a season after many questioned how much money the Cavs gave him in free agency, but that deal now looks to be a bargain. Jarrett Allen was a big part of why the Cavs were an elite defense last year, is a great screener, and is one of the most efficient scoring big men in the league. Collin Sexton, unfortunately, only played in 11 games last year before going out with a torn meniscus, and it remains uncertain if he will be a member of the Cavs again next season. But it is clear that the Cavs do need another scoring option alongside Darius Garland. As far as how Collin Sexton played in the 2021-22 season in limited games, well, he struggled from three and did find himself not playing in some closing minutes due to his ball dominance and poor defense, as Darius Garland was the favored option. But if he can accept being the number 2 to Darius Garland and being off the ball much more than he was in the earlier parts of his career, then there is a successful role for him in Cleveland. Lauri Markkanen seemed to be a weird acquisition last summer to put alongside two other bigs and Mobley and Jarrett Allen. But him playing in this multiple big system was not an absolute disaster by any stretch, something I thought it might be. His three-point shooting was quite inconsistent at times, but hopefully he can get back closer to 40% next season as he provides valuable and very much needed spacing for this team. Isaac Okoro continues to be a very good defender and remained a full-time starter for the majority of the season thanks to the injury of Collin Sexton amongst other injury problems. His three-point shooting and overall efficiency on offense did improve last year, despite still having the narrative that he is just not a good shooter. Now, ideally, he will continue to improve his shooting where he can get to being around 35% on 4 to 5 attempts per game, but he has certainly improved, and alongside his great defense, it makes him a very valuable player. Kevin Love had a great bounce-back season in his new role, coming off of the bench, and outside of Tyler Hero was one of the best sixth men in the league. His mentality was much more positive, his three-point shooting, spacing, and rebounding was very impactful, and it just looked like he was enjoying playing basketball once again. Caris Levert was acquired at the trade deadline as the Cavs looked to acquire another shot maker and scorer alongside Darius Garland, as the Cavs made a move to try and secure their spot in the playoffs. But Levert struggled in Cleveland. His role in the offense never looked natural or well-defined, and he struggled for efficiency, and in turn his production suffered. With only 1 year left on his contract, his production in the early part of next season will be important for the decisions the Cavs make moving forward. Cedi Osman had a hot and cold season, having some great offensive performances as Cedi Osman does, but also saw some time where he was getting benched or playing very little due to poor effort and lack of defensive intensity. Ultimately, his efficiency was back up from the 2020-21 season, and he provides some valuable spacing and bench scoring. Dean Wade was a very valuable bench big, filling in for the injured Jarrett Allen in the starting lineup at times before suffering his own injury. He continues to be a solid three-point shooter while being a physical and valuable defender. Rajon Rondo was acquired amidst the Cavs' point guard crisis and was a fine depth piece for them, and the same could be said for Ed Davis. And Lamar Stevens had a bigger role in his second season, partly thanks to injuries, and has taken some steps forward. Not yet a great rotational piece in the NBA, but certainly not a complete dud either. The biggest part of the Cavaliers' offseason sits with the restricted free agency of Collin Sexton. A great scoring guard, but one that would have to adjust to being a full-time shooting guard on offense with more time off of the ball if he does return. Not to mention the fact he will have to take some time to get back into game speed after such a significant injury. It appears as though there is mutual interest in Collin Sexton returning to Cleveland for the next few years. However, a sensible deal will have to be negotiated, and his value isn't overly clear at the moment. With Sexton being a very ball-dominant player up to this point in his career, while being a bad defender and coming off a serious lower body injury, there are some negatives you certainly have to consider when negotiating such a deal. Over $25 million a year was probably a guarantee before his injury, but that's likely not the case anymore. Around $20 to $22 million a year may be slightly more sensible. A contract of around $90 million over 4 years seems a bit more sensible. But let me know what type of deal you'd be comfortable offering Sexton this summer, as I honestly have no idea what type of value he will be getting. If Sexton does return, then I would expect Caris Levert is moved by the 2023 trade deadline. Levert was acquired at the 2022 trade deadline, but honestly was not that impressive and only has 1 year left on his contract. And given Sexton does most of what Levert does from a scoring and shot creation perspective, all while at a higher level, I would be very surprised if Levert was brought back past the 2022-23 season, given the Cavaliers in this situation will have Sexton, Jarrett, Lauri Markkanen, and Darius Garland all committed to big money moving forward, not to mention an inevitable Evan Mobley extension further down the line. For that reason, either this offseason or before the 2023 trade deadline, I would expect Caris Levert to be moved for some form of depth and or picks, again assuming that Collin Sexton is re-signed. Another key part of the Cavaliers offseason will be a Darius Garland extension, but that is not anything to discuss or debate. Darius Garland will get a much deserved max contract extension and will be a member of the Cleveland Cavaliers for the next 6 seasons. The Cavs do have other free agents, those being Ed Davis, Rajon Rondo, Moses Brown, and Brandon Goodwin, but none of them I consider to be important parts of the Cavaliers moving forward. Instead, I would expect the Cavs to add another good backup point guard, either via free agency or trade. Someone like DeLon Wright comes to mind as a good option in free agency, or even just potentially bringing back Ricky Rubio if there is still mutual interest. And signing a depth big could also be something on their radar. The Cavaliers also sit with picks 14, 39, and 56 in the 2022 draft, and that could be where they look to address either some depth in the front court, as well as a potential backup point guard or playmaker, specifically with pick 14. So obviously the future was bright for the Cleveland Cavaliers, but how bright is it truly? Well, this is going to be a playoff team from next year forward over the next decade, assuming they keep this group together. The question is, what's the upside? Well, that depends on the development of players within the organization. Is what we're seeing right now from Darius Garland near his prime level, or does he become one of the best 3 to 4 guards in the league? Is Evan Mobley an elite defensive player with fine to good offense, or does he improve his handle and spacing and become one of the most dominant two-way forces in the league? The development of these two players specifically is what will decide the ceiling of the Cavs. Even if Mobley and Garland do not develop into their highest upside potential, this Cavs team should still be one of the most consistent playoff locks in the East over the next decade. However, if Evan Mobley becomes a top 5 to 10 player in the league throughout his career, then the Cavs could reach title contender status, as the Cavs already have a good enough defense to be able to compete at that level. But they need a bit more depth, a bit more scoring production, something hopefully Collin Sexton can help them with next season if he returns, and a bit more top-end talent to truly be a title contender. And if Evan Mobley becomes one of the most dominant two-way players in the league, then they're going to have that top-end talent. Not to mention, Garland and Sexton can be those perimeter shot makers and creators that can be the number 2 and number 3 options alongside Evan Mobley. So ultimately, there is no bad future for the Cavaliers. At the very least, expect playoff basketball moving forward from them pretty much every year. Again, assuming they keep this core together. And if they reach their ceiling, well then the Cleveland Cavaliers could win a title with this core, as Garland and Evan Mobley reach their prime and could form one of the best duos in the NBA. That is my thoughts on what's next for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel for more What's Next videos over the next month. And thank you guys for watching. Peace.